Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to be with all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Carla Burns, and I am faculty at Naropa, and I also work for the Center for the Advancement of Contemplative Education at Naropa, and I am joined by my friend and dear colleague Jordan Quaglia, who is also faculty at Naropa, and he is the research director for the Center of the Advancement of Contemplative Education. And we're just thrilled to be with all of you. We've been working on this workshop together, kind of our heart offering and presentation tonight. And we're so excited to be in community with all of you for topics that we feel very personal and relevant for our lives. And we're, hoping that it can be of benefit to all of you as well. And so here we are together to really start to explore this topic of burnout, and going beyond burnout and being in a place where we can really start to acknowledge that we're all carrying a lot and hopefully gain some abilities and skills and tools to be able to work with the fact that we're all holding a lot and how to know what to do with that fact of life these days, right? So just welcome everybody. So happy to have you. So before we begin, true to Naropa and true to what we offer, contemplative style, we always really like to start by actually stopping and slowing down. And in this case, we're going to start by doing nothing. So find a way to be comfortable right now so that you can allow yourself to really relax into this idea of beginning by doing nothing. And so in this doing nothingness, find support, whatever is supporting you right now. It might be a chair that you're sitting on, the cushion. It could be the feeling of your feet touching the floor. Whatever it is that helps you to find just the sense of support for just a little while we engage in this non-practice practice of doing nothing. And as we embark on doing nothing, out of nothing inevitably comes something, right? So something will happen as we're doing nothing. So that something could be feelings that we have, emotions that we notice here, or maybe we sense our heart beating or our tummy rumbling. Maybe we just ate dinner. So as those things arise, we just welcome those things. So again, we're just not doing anything, but whatever arises, we just notice and we welcome it. So that can include things that we see in our atmosphere, our environment. I know I can see out the window right now. I see my tree that still has no leaves on it. And so I can just welcome that. We can also welcome maybe sounds from another room, another space that we're not in, or maybe the traffic from outside, and we just welcome that. Or maybe what we notice in doing nothing is that we have a whole lot of thoughts going on, and we can welcome those thoughts, whatever the textures are. Maybe they're speed or wondering what we're actually going to do in this workshop. Maybe just the sensation of newness and arrival and everything we think about that. So whatever it is that arises in these moments, we just notice and welcome and do our best to just stay doing nothing. So we'll just do that for a few moments together. We can also notice our breathing and welcome the breathing. Just welcoming all aspects of your experience. all the while continuing to do nothing and allowing the somethings that appear out of nothing to be welcomed. Whatever arises, just welcome it. So now we'll just stay with our breathing and see if you can really notice the whole body breathing. Just following the in and out breath, noticing the rhythm of this moment, the rhythm of the body as it breathes in and out. And maybe for 3 full rounds of breathing on the in-breath, we're going to go to the places in the body where we might notice some tension. And we're going to take the in-breath there. And on the out-breath, we're just going to release that tension. So let's do that together, going to the places of tension on the in-breath together. And releasing on the out-breath. And again, on the in-breath, going to places of tension. Releasing on the out-breath. And one more time, in and out. So just notice if anything's changed from when you first arrived, so we can also welcome who we are right now in this moment. Maybe there's a little bit more room or availability. Maybe you feel like you've arrived a little bit more. Maybe you have even more questions. So you can just welcome all of that. That is all part of the arrival process. And now just go ahead and take a real good look at your physical space. Notice the walls of your surroundings, the colors, the different objects in your place and space. This is another way for you to really arrive here in this moment, knowing that all of us are doing the same, having this process of arrival, and noticing that we all have our different characteristics and styles of ways in which we arrive in certain places. So just really bringing this present moment awareness through all of our senses. That's what part of doing the welcoming practices that we just did. And now really allowing the visual field to be here. And again, that sense of ground. Good. And now, in whatever way, just noticing you being here and welcoming yourself, touching yourself, saying, hey, I've arrived, I'm here. You know we can't see each other on the screen, but maybe you can just energetically give a welcome to all of us, not just Jordan and myself, but everybody who's arrived. You can welcome everybody here tonight to be together. So we're just welcoming all of us in this space. You know, we all came here together and we arose together seemingly out of nowhere. So we can welcome that co-arising. And I also want to point out that, we all got here because of some sort of personal endeavor or maybe a personal need. And now we're suddenly having a collective experience. And so we can also welcome that. So thank you all for arriving with me. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Jordan.
Thank you so much, Carla, and for that warm welcome. I definitely feel more settled myself as I'm about to speak, which is very helpful. And welcome again, everyone, to our workshop on Beyond Burnout, mindful compassion for those who carry a lot. You should be seeing my screen, I think. So let's see here. And we're really intending tonight to be kind of like an invitation into exploring this topic of burnout for yourself from the inside out. And we're going to offer some lenses for you to explore this. I'll be sharing some science. Carla later is going to lead us in a more extended practice period. And I'd say what's unique about the lenses that we're going to explore with tonight is this term that we call interconnected compassion. And so interconnected compassion we think of as different than just self-compassion or compassion for others. It really is a broader term, a broader lens for exploring burnout, and it offers more nuance, and we can get more into the complexity of this topic this evening with that. But to start off, I wanted to begin with an inquiry for you all, a question that might at first seem kind of unrelated to this topic of burnout, but I promise it has a purpose. So, and we're going to actually invite your participation in the chat. So hopefully you're willing to do that. Here's the question. What are 2 to 3 things you love that aren't people? Okay, maybe a little funny of a question. Like I said, it sounds unrelated to what we're talking about. But if you're willing to in the chat, share with us now, what are 2 to 3 things you love that aren't people? And I'll keep an eye out here, or we'll keep an eye out in the chat. Let's see if I can pull that up. I'm not sure. Oh yeah, okay, awesome. All right, I'm gonna read some of these off. Hopefully that's okay. Mountains, water, cheese. Oh, I love that. I love the variety there. My pets, awesome. We might return to that in a moment. Trees, lizards, and clouds. Sweet. I love that. I also love lizards. That's kind of a rare pet. Animals, movement, food, dogs, and travel. Birding, my dog. I'll leave that last one there for you all to explore. Rainy days, books, chocolate chip cookies, film, food, love. Ah, loving love. Yeah, I like that. Sunsets and love, another one like that. Awesome. My cat and nature. So hopefully you're feeling like this is an enjoyable thing to reflect on, even if you're not adding to the chat. But thank you so much to those of you who are adding. Coffee, movies, sleep, nature, books, music, trees, rocks, water. Love the process. I don't know where to stop, when to stop, what to skip. My cat, crochet, plants. I apologize if I'm skipping past yours, but I'm seeing it. I love what I'm seeing. The sky, my cat, stuffed animals, the ocean, the spring breeze. You know, so much of what you all love, I love too, which is interesting. I think that's worth reflecting on maybe. And I'll just say that I asked people in my life this question over the last few days to kind of trial it a little bit, and it made for some really good conversations. So I kind of recommend bringing this into your relationships if you feel moved to do that and see what other people say. Poetry, visual art, circles. Circles. Wow. Yeah. So specific. I love that. I was thinking in advance, I came up with the first sunlight after a cloudy day. We have a lot of sunlight here, fortunately, in Boulder, but yeah, when it gets cloudy, then the first time I see sunlight, I really love that. I also love the taste of sencha tea. Carla, you don't have to, but you're welcome to chime in if you'd like, and then we'll move forward from here.
Yeah, we had a fun conversation. I was telling Jordan that I love driving at night in the rain.
I love that. Um, Awesome. So thank you all for sharing. And like I said, this serves a purpose. It may seem kind of random or unrelated, but we're going to circle back to it and make sense of it maybe a little bit more later on. But it connects directly to what I consider to be one of the most important or interesting insights that I've discovered within this field of emotion science that I study within, for compassion training and for cultivating and growing more compassion for ourselves and others. And believe it or not, it has to do with puppies. Okay, so you can go ahead and take a look at these puppies on the screen. I actually know one of these puppies. I got to spend time with that puppy in the upper left there, that had the nickname Purple due to the purple collar. I love purple. I don't know these other puppies. I found them online. Hopefully, you all like them. And so, again, I promise this has a purpose. It's not just competing with the rest of the internet for your attention, although that's certainly part of it too. Um, I actually want you to notice what you feel. As silly as it seems, notice what you feel when you look at these puppies. And for many people, there's a positive feeling in looking at a cute animal like this, right? And maybe thinking about our own pets or the pets that we've come across, the animals that we've come across. And I also want to bring attention to your heart center. Is there a sort of warmth now around your heart as you look at these little puppies? Maybe more than there was previously. And I'm going to even go one step further tonight because I feel that you all can handle this kind of silly but serious inquiry here. Is thinking about if one of these puppies needed your help, if they needed your help with something. Puppies probably do need help. They need fed, they need to be taken outside, need to be played with, all sorts of stuff, right? So if one of them suddenly needed your help, would maybe this warm feeling, if you feel that, this feeling that you have, would that maybe move you to want to help this puppy? And don't worry, cat lovers, I've got you covered here, okay? In case you weren't feeling the puppies, Carla is excited about that. So kittens too maybe evoke some similar kind of feelings, some heartwarming feelings. And this is really the point of this kind of exercise, is there's a deeper inquiry here for you all. And I wanted to raise it now at the beginning of our workshop so you can begin reflecting on it. It may not be a puppy or a kitten for you, but what's something that you can think of right now that immediately warms your heart? It might be one of those things you talked about earlier, like the ocean or circles or just love itself. But the basic idea is that it consistently, when you bring it to mind, it consistently evokes a sort of similar feeling as we might feel when we look at these puppies or these kittens. And so we'll circle back to this, like I said, but you might think of it as a kind of inner resource that we're going to work with, and that's going to potentially help us to understand compassion and potentially how to cultivate compassion. Maybe it's even a little bit, the way I think about it, a kind of little shortcut into some of the aspects of compassion that are sometimes more difficult to access. So holding that in mind, I think I see some stuff entering the chat. So I'm not monitoring that at the moment, but maybe Carla, you can let me know if there's something, but maybe you all are just sharing what it is that warms your heart. And I'd love to see that later on too.
Yes,
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to read a couple of them? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We just had a few more roll in. Someone making me laugh and love, and somebody growing and learning in healthy ways to take care of themselves, and my childhood cat who passed, and a
Mm,
warm fire.
mm. Thank you. Thanks
Mhm.
for those that shared, and thanks, Carla, for reading those off. So we'll come back to this. I promise there'll be more pets later on, or at least we'll talk about puppies and kittens again. But back to our regularly scheduled program, which admittedly is on something a little more complex and difficult than just puppies or kittens. But we got them in here, and they're going to be part of the presentation later on too. So I promise. Um, as you know, we're exploring burnout this evening, and I'm going to share more about kind of a scientific lens on burnout, how I think about burnout, which is a bit different sometimes than how science, in general tends to think about burnout. And then we're going to talk about, as I said, interconnected compassion, which we really have been leaning into as part of our compassion initiative here at Naropa. We increasingly feel that interconnected compassion is kind of the right frame for thinking about training compassion. We don't think it's as useful to focus on just one orientation of compassion or another, like just self-compassion and training that, or just compassion for others and training that. We're interested in kind of the not only the relationships between self and other compassion, but also in receiving compassion from others and consideration of what we might call a sort of broader ecosystem of care and compassion that we're all embedded in. And we could, notice not only the benefits of being embedded in an ecosystem of care and compassion, but also, as it pertains to this topic of burnout, sometimes there's certain deficiencies, or we might say compassion or care blind spots in that ecosystem. And that's all part of the nuance and complexity of this topic of burnout that, like I said, we hope tonight that you experience this as a kind of invitation to explore burnout as you uniquely experience that. So, what is burnout? Before I define it myself, I want to give you an assessment that's a scientifically validated assessment tool. It's just a single question, and yet it's correlated with other larger inventories on burnout pretty well. And so I'll be able to give you a kind of readout of how to interpret your score here. And it's pretty simple. It just says rate your current level of burnout. And notice I haven't defined burnout yet, so hopefully that's a term you've heard before. But just however you understand that, rate your current level of burnout. You don't need to put it in the chat or anything like that. It's just for your own reflection. But from 0, not at all burned out, to 10, extremely burned out, where would you say that you fall right now? So I'm just giving another moment for you to reflect on that. Sometimes it's hard to find an average. You might talk more about a range that you've been fluctuating within. That's all good too. But based on the research, based on this paper that I've got cited in the bottom left there, a score of 5 or above indicates that you might currently be in a phase of burnout. Okay, so if you rated yourself as 5 or above, that might mean that you're currently relating to this experience of burnout in some kind of more emphasized way. That doesn't mean that it's, going to last for a really long time or that it fits all the other criteria or something like that. But it might be worth noticing that experience and exploring it like we're doing this evening. So again, what is burnout? Well, I like to think of burnout really broadly. And I found this broad definition of burnout that I appreciate. It says burnout is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. Now, if you go to the scientific literature, and this is where I'm differ a little bit maybe, burnout tends to be just in the context of work-related stress, so occupational stress. And I don't think that's as helpful to kind of narrow the frame so much around burnout. There's lots of stuff in our world that may contribute to our burnout experience. Just looking at the news these days seems to cause that. Maybe it's always caused that kind of feeling. I don't know. So I'd like this nice broad definition, and maybe you can relate to this sort of regardless of whether it's work-related or not. And of course, it's not just a subjective experience. We can see evidence for burnout in different biomarkers. Here's just one study I found showing that that there are differences in the brains of those reporting burnout. So normally, when we're sort of calmly alert, when we're resting, the brain shows a steady rhythm that helps different regions stay coordinated. But in people experiencing burnout in this study, they found that that rhythm was weaker, particularly in the front right side of the brain. And so it's a little complicated to understand maybe what exactly that means, but I think it's worth noting that this wasn't during stress or effort that these brain differences arose. This was the brain at rest. So there's something that suggests that even burnout even changes, how we experience ourselves when we're at rest. But to make this a bit more concrete, I wanted to share a couple case examples because I think there's many different expressions of burnout, and this will really help us make it a bit more concrete. Alec is a committed activist working on an urgent social and environmental cause. The work matters deeply to him, and he feels a strong moral responsibility to keep going. He routinely skips meals and downtime to meet deadlines, attend actions, and support others in the movement. He feels guilty when prioritizing his needs and practicing self-care, while also gradually withdrawing from friends and family, telling himself he'll reconnect when things calm down. Alec doesn't feel burned out at first. Instead, he feels driven. His sacrifice is justified. But over time, Alec becomes irritable and increasingly reactive. Small setbacks feel devastating. Close relationships strain. His capacity to stay grounded under pressure diminishes. So I think this is a good kind of concrete example. Maybe it's very relatable to some of us. When we're working on something bigger than just our immediate scope of care, those our family or our loved ones or our local community. When we're working on something much bigger, and there's a quality of urgency in it, there's this possibility sometimes that our care for that bigger thing, our compassion for that bigger cause, can make us sort of overlook some of the smaller actions of care that keep us resourced for that kind of activity. And so we might, overlook the value of caring for ourselves or our loved ones, or our local community because we're so focused on this bigger cause and it feels so much bigger. This amount of suffering feels so vast that it becomes kind of easy to justify sacrificing our own needs in light of it. And yet, over time, that can erode our own well-being in ways that make it harder for us to show up for that cause. So I call this care bypassing. It's a little bit like spiritual bypassing, if you've heard that term before. But I find this to be a helpful term, care bypassing, when we're caring for a much bigger cause, and then we're overlooking or bypassing the smaller actions of care that keep us resourced. All right, let's look at a very different example now of burnout. Mari is a hospital nurse who entered healthcare because she genuinely cared about relieving suffering. Early in her career, that care felt meaningful, even energizing. Over time, however, the volume and intensity of suffering she encountered increased, while systemic constraints made it harder to offer the kind of care she believed in. Gradually, something shifted. Mari still shows up and does her job competently, but emotionally, she feels distant. Patients blur together. She notices a creeping cynicism toward the healthcare system and at times numbness toward the suffering. In the evenings, she finds herself drinking more than she used to, one of the few ways she feels she can care for herself. Okay, so this is a different manifestation, a different expression of burnout. And this actually fits with what another area of research conducted by others calls compassion collapse. Okay, and it's kind of a mirror image of care bypassing. It's when the amount of suffering that we're encountering or exposed to is so big, so large, that we actually kind of numb to it. We check out a little bit. Our compassion collapses. And it's a little bit paradoxical because you would think as the amount of suffering grows, our compassion would just increase and increase and increase with it. But at a certain point, the amount of suffering seems to exceed our capacity to hold that amount of suffering. And that's when you see this compassion collapse effect occur. And this is one of the things we can work with through compassion training and through cultivating compassion is this realization that our hearts are big enough to hold it all. Believe it or not, our hearts are big enough to hold it all. Okay, but these are, of course, are just a few examples of burnout, just a fraction of the possible ways it may show up. One of our colleagues here at Naropa, Clarissa Segrand, did a study on mental health counselors and their experience of burnout. And she found these factors were linked with the experience of burnout in those counselors. Organization-related challenges like systemic dysfunction, supervisor challenges. So if you're a supervisor or leader themselves is burnout, that can have a kind of contagion effect maybe, or it can just contribute, decisions and things like that that affect your well-being. And then also maybe uniquely for this population, but many people can relate to it, I'm guessing, is when some of these counselors were trying to advocate for their clients and encounter different barriers. That led to different kinds of boundary challenges around their role and where to step forward and where to maybe shift strategy. So all of these things and more, can be some of the complexity. And that's what I was speaking to earlier. When we kind of widen our lens and view compassion as this interconnected compassion, we can see why we're part of this ecosystem of care and compassion that maybe, has deficiencies or blind spots or, unique barriers that we have to relate to. And we think by relating to interconnected compassion in a more explicit way, by better understanding and approaching compassion and care in that way, we get a sort of more nuanced compass for navigating the complexity of this stuff in daily life. So we'll return to that in just a moment. But all of this kind of points to this truth. Burnout really isn't one thing, and there's not really a single solution to burnout. So as much as we'd love to offer a kind of prescription, like, here you go, here's how to heal burnout or avoid burnout in the future. Like I said, it's more of an invitation this evening to explore burnout for yourselves. And we do think that we're going to offer some things that, some tools and some ideas and so on that are useful for this kind of exploration. And we especially think that compassion and interconnected compassion, as I've said, offers a powerful lens for exploring burnout and it's a gentle lens. It allows us to make discoveries that matter about our burnout, that actually make a difference in healing from it or alleviating it in ourselves and others. So let's now talk a little bit about what I mean by interconnected compassion. So here's a definition of interconnected compassion: a broad form of compassion in which self-compassion and compassion for others are experienced as essential and interconnected. Okay, essential and interconnected. What that means is that when we're doing one, we're not forgetting about the other. That's what the essential piece means, right? So when we're caring for others or having compassion for others, when we're extending that compassion to others, we're not forgetting that we have needs too, that we're struggling, that we have difficulties that we need to tend to. And similarly, when we're extending compassion to ourselves, when we're practicing things like self-compassion or self-care, we're awake to the ways that that self-care and self-compassion replenishes us and helps us show up for all the people in our lives that we love and we care about. And so we're less likely to feel that kind of undercurrent or friction of guilt for caring deeply for ourselves. In fact, reflecting on this interconnected view invites us to care for ourselves even more deeply, because we understand that when we're fully resourced, that's not just helping us, it's having ripple effects that extend out and help many others too. So here's another way of looking at it. Often compassion is taught and trained and researched in this sort of way here. We made this division some time ago within the field of compassion research and training between what we call self-compassion and other-oriented compassion or other compassion, often just termed compassion. And we like to, I think in the West, especially in individualistic societies, sort of think of ourselves as independent people. We're just operating on our own. So when we're doing self-compassion, it's just us, and we're doing this kind of self-compassion for ourselves. And that's somehow separate from when we're extending this compassion to others. And then we're this separate circle. And then there's this kind of radiating out of compassion to these separate others. So I raise the question, or interconnected compassion asks us, is this really true to our experience of compassion? And how often when we're practicing compassion in the real world, do we need just one type of compassion or another, right? So if you don't believe me that this is how it's being framed and talked about, I conducted a literature review in 2020, and I found that the field of compassion science had sort of bifurcated itself. There was this binary bias where studies were either studying self-compassion or compassion for others, and they were strongly emphasizing one or the other. And there were very few studies that were looking at the relationships between them. So this invites us to ask, is there another way? And this is one way of depicting interconnected compassion or a view of interconnected compassion. And it shows that instead of being totally separate circles, oftentimes, especially in close relationships, there's an overlap, right? Our nervous systems affect one another. So, for instance, if you're in a romantic relationship and your partner's going through something difficult, like an illness, that's likely going to affect you too. It's going to have challenges that bring up stuff for you too. And when you're relating to them about that illness, maybe they're sharing the news with you or some update about it or what's difficult for them, you often have to feel care for them and yourself at the same time because it's affecting both of you, right? So that's an example of how we have to practice self-compassion in a way that maybe has ripple effects for others, close others, and many others, even strangers in our life. And when we're practicing other oriented care and other oriented compassion toward a friend or a family member or a roommate or a romantic partner, that also is likely to benefit us over the long term. There's reciprocity built into that situation. So there's a lot more overlap than we typically give credit for. Right. And if you want to see an example from our research on this topic, this is a mental health counselor describing their experience of kind of oscillating or shuttling between self and other oriented compassion during a session and how it was helpful. They said a client brought in something that kind of caught me off guard because it was something that was occurring in my personal life. So I was, feeling myself having that compassion toward the client of like, wow, that really does sound difficult. And then also coming back for a second and being like, yeah, this is oddly specific and this is definitely pulling at your own heartstrings. So, like, breathe and it's okay. And also be with this client. And so this is a kind of zoomed in look of what it's like maybe from the inside out of kind of moving between or shuttling between self-compassion and compassion for others flexibly. And that's all part of how we can cultivate compassion when we understand it as an interconnected system. We can have these experiences of flexibly moving between them in an undivided way, not totally heading in one direction or the other, but keeping them in relationship with each other. So we can look at it kind of as it unfolds through time like this. There's a sustainable care where we're moving flexibly between these two over time versus a kind of divided approach to other-oriented compassion and self-compassion where we sort of give, and then we kind of crash out because we don't have any energy left. And then we just maybe fall into some kind of self-care or numbness or something like that, right? And yeah, so we can reflect on this. I'm going to press forward because I'm recognizing the time, but we could reflect on this quite a bit more at a theoretical level. But I'd like to offer you all some inquiry questions for exploring this. Maybe not just now, but in the future. You could make note of these or come back to them.
Jordan.
How can I honor and tend to my own suffering, even when it seems small compared to the problems I'm empathizing with? Okay, this would be particularly relevant to Alec in our example. Caring for this bigger cause, can he remember that his own suffering is valid too? It's worth his attention and care. Or for Mari, how can I strengthen my capacity to relate to others' suffering without becoming depleted, overwhelmed, or numbing out? This is something we're going to talk about, assuming we have time. How to transform a kind of divided experience of care into a kind of both and care and compassion. And then we could get into some advanced questions we don't really have time for tonight, but just to point to where we can go in our compassion training. How might caring for myself and caring for others become part of the same compassionate movement rather than competing demands? Or I really like this one, this ecosystem view. How can I relate to compassion as a shared relational system, one that includes me, rather than something I must individually supply or manage? Okay, so these questions might seem future oriented. If you're currently in the midst of burnout, you might wonder, how are these going to help me? But I think there's actually a kind of undoing effect of some of the effects of burnout when we begin to deeply reflect on these. So if you are currently in a phase of burnout, You might make note of these as something to revisit and journal about and explore within your own experience. And how we relate to these in the context of our compassion training here at Naropa is we think of this interconnected compassion approach as, training different facets of compassion rather than training different types of compassion. So we try and cultivate compassion for others without losing our sense of self. And we try and cultivate self-compassion and receiving compassion from others through recognition that self-compassion is supporting not just us, but many others. So what we call self-compassion sometimes is a bit of a misnomer. Yes, it's initially for ourselves, but actually it has these wider ripple effects over time. And then that last one there, navigating between self and other-oriented compassion. There's a lot of complexity to that. Like I said, there's that flexibly moving between them. There's ways that we can unify those experiences. We see lots of evidence of those different blends of compassion in our research on this topic. And so we work with things like transforming empathy into compassion to cultivate undivided forms of other-oriented compassion. And then we have interconnected self-compassion practices, and we focus on how to get better at receiving care and kindness from others, which sometimes is uncomfortable because we have to encounter our own vulnerability in the process, right? And then we can focus on compassion-based boundaries. So what I'd like to do, and a nice thing here is that we don't have to go in order too. These are like synergistic aspects or facets of interconnected compassion. So we can jump around. So I actually want to start with boundaries this evening. I feel that if we do an experiential on boundaries first here, we'll see if we have time for the other stuff. But I felt like this was the most important to get into tonight with you all. And one of the reasons I think that is, I think there's this kind of, we'll get back to that in a second. I think there's this kind of relationship between boundaries and burnout that's really key. And I've been exploring this in my own experience recently as I was getting ready for the workshop. That whenever we're feeling a bit of burnout, it actually weakens our capacity to set healthy boundaries. And so that has the potential of causing what's sometimes called a vicious cycle, right? A vicious cycle, maybe not the best term for it, but it's kind of an unhealthy cycle where the experience of burnout weakens our capacity to set new boundaries. And then that, of course, weakens or contributes to more burnout over time because we need those boundaries in place to avoid more burnout. On the other hand, if we get better at setting boundaries, that can contribute to a kind of virtuous cycle where better boundaries support a lessening of burnout, and that lessening of burnout strengthens our capacity to set boundaries and so on, right? So I think this is a really important thing to explore. And uniquely, we like to talk about compassion-based boundaries. And compassion-based boundaries are a kind of boundary that arises from compassion for ourselves, others, or ideally from this interconnected view of compassion. And in other words, these are boundaries that don't come from fear or avoidance or control. I think a lot of times people kind of resist setting boundaries when they are grounded in compassion because they feel that somehow boundaries are antithetical to their compassion. But we actually see boundaries as another part of our compassion system, another part of this interconnected compassion system. And when they arise from compassion, they can support not only self-protection, but also connection, and they can support others that we care about. So what I'd like to offer now is a little practice that I call care clearing. And we'll offer a kind of briefer form of this practice. There's a longer form of this practice that, we'll see. Maybe we'll get to that. But I invite you now to begin with some mindful breathing. So if you'd like, you can close your eyes or you could keep them open. And this practice is really intended to be a tool that you can revisit after tonight's workshop as a brief practice or a more extended practice that really helps you let go of what's truly not yours to carry. So you can think of it maybe in this moment, it even helps you kind of drop your shoulders a little bit. There's a whole lot of discussion of letting things go out there. There's a whole lot of advice. Just let that go. Just drop it. But the truth is, letting go often requires an intentional practice and process. So this can help fill that gap. So again, mindful breathing, take a few moments to breathe naturally, simply noticing what it's like to inhale and exhale with mindful awareness. Then gently invite more of your attention to each out breath as it occurs, pairing it with an intention to release anything extra you may be holding in your body or mind that does not belong to you. The general idea here is that each person is only meant to carry so much at a time. So it's actually supportive to let go of any problems, tensions, or burdens that aren't meant for you. Letting go in this way is not about leaving a burden behind that others must now shoulder, but rather about aligning your inner experience with what will be best for everyone. You can silently express this intention with a phrase like, with this out breath, I release what is not mine to carry. And if it helps with your mindful release, you can visualize white light softly rippling from your heart in ever widening circles, gently clearing the space within and around you. And now focus more of your awareness on each in breath, joining it with an intention to reconnect with and reclaim any personal vitality you may have lost touch with recently. For this step, the view is that everyone you care for benefits more when you are fully resourced and attuned with all of your natural energy. So you might say, on this in breath, I reconnect with all my vital energy. And again, if visualization supports your practice, you can imagine nourishing energy gently returning to and enhancing the shimmer of your heart with each in breath. And then just one more time, we'll return to the out breath for a few more mindful breaths and releasing anything that's not yours to shoulder. And we can set one final intention here. May my natural breath continuously nourish and energize my healthy boundaries. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. And I'll just offer one last little tool, a very brief form of what we just did here that I think is perfect for any time that you have to make a transition. I kind of picture people doing this maybe, at the end of the day, you are in your car right before you go into your house or your apartment, and you're wanting to kind of let go of the work stress and have a kind of gentle transition into the evening. And I call this hands release, heart stays open, right? So you just gently clench your fists, then open your hands, and you can say to yourself, hands release, heart stays open. So notice here, there's a continuity of care and compassion. We're not closing our hearts as we transition. The flow of care is shifting. maybe more toward ourselves and our loved ones at home, but we can still release some of that work stress or whatever the previous situation was. So this offers us a good transition point. Unfortunately, I didn't get back to puppies and kittens. I apologize, but we do cover that in our mindful compassion training program, the course that's coming up. It's a little bit paradoxical, or you might not think of it, but if you're dealing with burnout, it can be really helpful actually to focus on transforming your experience of caring for others, not just adding more self-compassion and self-care, but actually transforming that experience of caring for others to be something that's less depleting for you. And so that's the role of transforming empathy into compassion that we talk about. And that's where the puppies and kittens come back in, because that serves as a kind of compassion spark that helps you to resource and transform that empathy into compassion. We didn't have time for that, but we do have time for an interconnected self-compassion practice. And so I'm excited for that. And I turn it back to you, Carla.
Thank you so much, Jordan. There's so much there, and I'm excited to go deeper when we do our uh, Naropa compassion training. Um, and so, in thinking about this and contemplating this notion of interconnected compassion, or an ecosystem of compassion, or some terminology out there right now is global compassion. I just feel so expansive and moved by this, and also just so curious of like, how do we actually like practice with this? How do we have this be part of our everyday life? And I love, Jordan, that you gave us some, simple things that we can do in the moment to remind ourselves of this sense of how we come back in the moment when we're experiencing burnout. What are some things that we can do? How do we work with boundaries and things like that? And then it's also nice to have these longer practice sessions, which is what we like to do at Naropa, is be more in these slower, slowed down spaces and time where we really have a moment to really investigate what it really means, on a deeper level. So in a way, we need both. We need these on the spot sorts of practices when we're experiencing burnout, and then also to vacillate to other times where we can really take our time and explore what it really means when we're talking about interconnected compassion or an ecosystem of compassion. And so for me, I'm always amazed at how the intelligence of our body is already pointing us in those sorts of directions, right? Like when I hear this phrase, global compassion or interconnected or even ego, I love it because it sparks this sense in me of like place. And when I think of place, I can also think of not only the physical place that I'm at, but also my body really as a lived site of meaning, and the intelligence of my body that's helping me to unfold into this already natural ability to be compassionate and to already be part of an ecosystem of compassion. And so I'd like to invite us into this practice of how we come to really explore and know and experience for ourselves what interconnected compassion means. So, again, this invitation to just relax a little bit, find your place for practice, just coming into this moment and going back into that sense of the whole body breathing, and then just really noticing what it's like to feel this sense of slowing down through the breathing, through noticing the heart beating. And this is where our embodied intelligence really has the opportunity to come to the fold, come to the surface, because we're just slowing down enough to really pay attention and not override our natural intelligence. So this slowness and connection and intelligence are all connected. So, from this slower place, just start to bring to heart and mind an area in your life where you're experiencing burnout. So, before you kind of gave yourself a rating of your level of burnout, and now just take a little bit of a deeper dive and just really bring your awareness and attention to where you're experiencing burnout in your life. And what does that experience actually feel like in your body? See if you can stay with the felt sense of that. Where does that feeling arise? So, is it in the chest or the belly or the head or the shoulders? Jordan invited us into our shoulders. Where do you need tending to in this live site of meaning? Where are you experiencing the burnout? Where in the body needs tending to? And so now you're going to bring your own hands to this place on your body, right? So bring it somewhere that expresses for you where you're experiencing this burnout. And just acknowledging with your own touch, like recognizing all that you're going through, right? And feel your own care for yourself through the touch of your own hands, through your own acknowledgement. Not bypassing what the body has been telling you for a long time. Hey, my heart is hurting. I'm in grief. Whatever it is, right? So just breathe. And just feel what it's like to just acknowledge in this way, in this embodied way, not just thinking about how we're burned out, but really meeting that with contact. So I'm holding my hands on my heart, and I'm going to invite all of you now to hold your heart with two hands and just feel the organ of the heart, right? Really notice that and feel that there's space around this organ, meaning that there's a front of the heart, sides of your heart, and there's also the back of your heart, right? So really feeling into the back of the heart. Sometimes we get so forward focused and so fast all the time that we forget the whole dimensionality of this organ, of this powerful organ. So feel the back of the heart and notice any sensations there. Maybe it's achy, or it hurts a little bit. Or maybe it feels really good in some kind of inexplicable way, but just noticing that feeling, noticing that tender place. So as we're holding our own organ of our heart and how tender it is, we can also notice how it's this heart center, this area actually extends beyond the physical organ that we have and into something that's boundless and cosmic, right? We have a boundless heart. So there's this collective quality that while I feel into the sensation of my own heart, I'm also feeling into this quality of a collective kind of heart that we all experience, this unbounded capacity that goes beyond the boundary of my body. So I can experience both at the same time. I can experience my own heart, and I can also experience the collective heart, this vast collective heart. And I can feel how that heart is connected to all hearts and connected to all of you. And I can experience with this one collective heart all of the grief that I carry, right? All of the grief and all of the disappointment and the heartache for myself as well as for others. So when I'm paying attention to my own heart in this way, on the in-breath, I can notice that grief. And on the out-breath, I can send healing and acknowledgement and comfort to this possibly wounded place. And that is both deeply personal and profoundly universal. And just breathe. And so now we're going to move to the shoulders. And you can either touch one shoulder or you can touch both shoulders. And again, just acknowledging the weight or the burden or the overwhelm that you might be personally feeling in these shoulders. And just making contact with all that you carry and all that you hold. And on the in-breath, really bringing your awareness to that burden or overwhelm that you could be feeling. And as you're doing this, you're recognizing that you're also touching in with the burden that so many others carry and have carried now and across lifetimes. So on the in-breath, we touch in to the burden we and others carry. And on the out-breath, we wish for this burden to be put down, to be taken away, to be dissolved. Or we can even imagine it maybe sliding down the front and back of the body to be received by the earth. So just feeling that sense of you as a lived site of meaning in an ecosystem, that when you touch into your own pain and suffering, you actually touch into the collective. And just release what you do not need to carry, and release what none of us need to carry by this touch. And now you're going to bring your hands to your belly, and I'm hugging my belly. And hug the belly, and as you're hugging your belly, know that you're also hugging the whole world. Feel that. Feel like you're hugging the earth when you hug your belly, because you are the earth. You've never been separated from her. We are earth beings. So hug yourself and send yourself the compassion of deep love and comfort in this hug. And feel what it's like to be held with warmth, compassion, and love. And at the same time, remember that you're embracing the entirety of the earth herself, to include all beings in this hug. Your whole belly is the earth, and you are giving her the compassion and care that she longs for. So breathing in and out, feel what it's like to both receive and give this compassionate embrace. Okay, good. Now you're going to take your two hands and you're going to hold your hands together. And you're going to send love to yourself through each hand. And feel it through the palms. And feel this sense of kinship and connection with yourself. And really feel right now you're not alone. Feel that grip, that tight grip. My grandma used to hold my hand and felt so good. So hold yourself like you're your own grandmother. Feel that you're not alone. Feel what it's like to have a hand to hold. And feel your hands as a manifestation of all who need a helping hand, right? The compassion of knowing that we're not doing it alone, that there are other hands to hold. And breathe. And now we get to be even more beautiful, and you're going to kiss each hand. Right? And feel appreciated and loved for all that you are and all that you do and all that you give. And feel the connection of the hands as the extension of your heart. And feel the royalty, right? The royalty and worth of your birthright and of all beings who are suffering at the hands of oppression. And as you kiss your hands, you kiss theirs and claim the royalty that we all carry in our inherent humanity. Feel that. And now softly touch your throat, caress your throat as you gently invite an openness in this area to open your voice. Maybe a voice that's been strained and unheard, right? As you open your voice, open to the voice of all beings who cry to be free. All beings who cry to be free. And maybe breathe and say, ah, and let it out. Not just for you, but for everybody. Ah. And lastly, you're going to softly close and touch your eyes and caress these eyes that witness life, and that are the collective eyes that see and know about all who suffer, including ourselves, that we are seen and we are witnessed. And these eyes also hold the vision to see both the solutions and the injustices at the same time. So give some love to these eyes. See through not just your own individual eyes, but through the eyes of the world. Good, and now breathe. And just rest your hands wherever you would like. And just feel back into the whole body breathing. And notice whatever you're experiencing in this moment. Coming back to that sense of welcoming it. Whatever's here. Maybe it's openness, sense of freedom, maybe more thoughts or resistance. Whatever it is, it's welcome here. And with our compassion practice, it's really this desire that all beings can experience freedom, and that we can be that direct link to ourself as a being to experience freedom and to all beings. And so may we all feel loved. May we all feel unburdened and connected. May we feel that warm embrace of life. May we heal this earth. May we all have a helping hand. May our voices be free. And may we all feel a sense of resource and happiness as our divine inheritance. And now think of any other wish that you'd like to send out to yourself and to all of us simultaneously, this co-arising wish. Good. So may we all be free. And now let this energy move down from your head and your heart and your belly. Let it go down into your legs and drop deep down into the earth. Just really bringing your essence and your energy down into the earth, going all the way to the core of the earth. Letting all of our energies meet there, the core of the earth, and mix and mingle with the energy of the earth and with each other. And now we're going to feel that collective energy of compassion and care coming up from deep in the core of the earth, coming up, 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 up through the bottom of our feet, up through our legs, up through our belly and our hearts, and extending into our arms and into our head. Just feel the sense of this energetic compassion, collective compassion, becoming a part of us, becoming a part of our cellular makeup and our DNA, drawing from the power of our communal wisdom, our embodied wisdom, and feeling this sense of a collective heart. And so as we move forward from this practice, maybe we can set our intentions to really pool this care that we've all manifested together, pool all of our intentions and care for all beings, and know that we have that kind of power behind us when we're really caring for ourselves and when we're caring for others. And we send it out everywhere in all directions. May all beings be free. All right. So thank you all for practicing with me. So just take a moment to come back and look around your space once again. Notice anything that's changed and welcome that. So that was a little offering of a taste of what interconnected compassion practice feels like. All right. So now we'd love to be able to open this up for a bit of Q&A and some comments from all of you, hearing about what your experience has been or any questions that you have for either Jordan or I. So we'd love to open it up. Please share your comments in the chat.
Carla, as we await possible questions, thank you so much for leading that practice. And yeah, someone put in the chat there was a little bit of muffling. I don't know if it was maybe you had notes or something, but it was just lightly. There was just a few moments, so I'll just highlight that. I think just in case it happens again. But I wanted to ask you, do you feel like your practice of compassion over the years has lessened the sense of kind of inner conflict around taking care of yourself? Do you feel like that's like, can you relate to at some point in the past feeling kind of inner conflict or guilt about self-care or self-compassion, and that has actually transformed for you over time?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I definitely was feeling like part of compassion was being responsible for everybody
Mm,
all the time.
yeah.
And it was really actually through compassion practice and through coming to understand more of this sense of space and atmosphere. I didn't realize that for so long I had actually been leaving myself out of space or
Mm,
out of this idea of being part of a global community. And
mm,
so it was through practice and through breathing that it was like, oh, right, like I actually am a part of somebody who needs compassion and someone who needs care, and that
yeah.
I really cannot be impactful or skillful if I really am always coming from a place of leaving myself out and a place of depletion. So, but
Mm,
it took time. It wasn't something that happened overnight, and it was something that I had to realize about myself.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and
Nice.
I'm still practicing with it. It can tend, when we go back into those patterns, sometimes we don't
Mm,
realize it. But
yeah.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and noticing like yeah, someone put relatable in the chat. Yeah, how relatable that experience is. But also, knowing you, and I can relate as well to what I think I'm about to say, which is that you're still a very other-oriented person. And you still, practice compassion and kindness, and I feel you lead with that. You lead your life with that principle. And so somehow, even though you've gotten better at, taking care of yourself and that kind of self-compassion, it hasn't subtracted something from your compassion for others, right? And I think that there can be a kind of way when we think about them as separate ideas that we think somehow becoming more self-compassionate is going to mean withdrawing care or lessening our compassion or being less of an other-oriented person, or that somehow, maybe we inherit the idea that being other-oriented is a problem, that we shouldn't be compassionate toward others. So I'm just noticing, yeah, like, it seems that you've managed to find the synergy maybe between those two principles. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to just be, what do I want to say? Um, I radiate more. That's like the best
Mm,
way I can explain it. If I'm not on edge, there's like this dullness that can happen, and like any little thing that feels like extra,
yeah.
I feel like I get a little dim. But
Mm,
when I do
mhm.
have that sense of resource, then there is more of that capability to, I feel like, the radiance of who I really am and who I think we all really are,
Mm,
We just sometimes things happen to us in life and it can feel like things get a little dimmed down.
yeah.
So, And I feel the same way about you, Jordan.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I've been using the word sparkle recently. I feel like, you're saying radiance. I'm trying to have some kind of sparkle sometimes.
Yes.
Um, we've got a question in the Q&A. Is there a connection between burnout and avoidance? How do we come back from numbness to genuinely wanting to connect with others again? Caregiver here. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So what you're describing, is similar to what one of the examples that I gave at the outset, where sometimes we give, and at a certain point we begin to feel a kind of, um, you know, a freeze response or a numbness or a kind of checking out or something like that around the amount of suffering. Or if there's some kind of new suffering, we feel like I can't tend to that. I've got all of this to tend to. And so we kind of, bracket it or something like that. And I would say that a lot of times the guidance that's being given that I see, in other training programs or just in a lot of other contexts, like the online spaces in general, and there is truth in this, is that we're supposed to tend to that by offering ourselves more self-compassion and more self-care. But sometimes that experience isn't so realistic to being a caregiver and being, in a role that's still having to output on a regular basis. And that's one of the reasons that we think that it's important, and when you're in a caregiving role or you're really other oriented person, to not just, try and balance out the equation by just adding more self-compassion in the mix. It's often not as simple as that, is it? We also have to work with how we're showing up to others not being as draining to us as maybe it has been. And a lot of times in that process, it's a subtle thing. But if we can learn to begin to shift those states of empathy into compassion, which is what I was going to cover later on in the talk, we didn't have time for this evening. And frankly, it's best if we spend an extended period learning about that. But there are resources that we can point you to for that if you're not able to make it to our course. But it can begin to thaw that numbness. And it's a bit paradoxical, and we may even resist the idea that somehow transforming our other oriented care is part of the answer here. But my experience is that, yeah, lessening that resistance and working with what comes up around that numbness directly is often more effective than just adding more self-compassion or self-care. And it does involve a kind of inner alchemy of that kind of numbness. And it is possible to begin gently doing that in ways that undo over time. They get momentum and it begins to unwind some of that numbness. So, wonderful question. Thank you for your honesty. And hopefully that helped a little bit. Carla, do you want to share anything about that?
No, I think you described it beautifully. Yeah.
We do have two more questions here. We'll see if we can get to them. Uh, can you talk about racism-infused incidents, which may be unconscious, but affects those who are the targets repeatedly? How to manage that kind of ongoing stress and being on guard? Yeah.
Hmm.
Right. A more specific context for relating to compassion that can be really challenging.
Yeah, I mean that's a big question. That's an important question, Um, whether you're, the target of racism or any kind of ism, and it feels like it's just, I'm getting the impression of it's like repeatedly in the field. And I, can understand that completely. And I think it's really important to have this sense of like what's resource for ourselves, as much as possible. What are the ways in which we're around those that give us, where we can be in more of a sense of safety, where we don't have to feel like we're going to, continually be bombarded in that way. So making sure that we're really being replenished by those who are supportive of every, of our humanity and of who we
Mm.
are, and not going into this care bypassing. I think this is where it's like really,
Mm,
really important and really knowing, um, you know, that there is a time actually to retreat and that we don't have to automatically go toward having, compassion for everybody in that moment. Or even if it's suddenly like, well, I need to be an interconnected compassion. I think that it is compassion for everyone, for us to take care of ourselves and to say no in moments of, injustice. Those are also forms of compassion. And I think this is what's being pointed out here, is when it's like these everyday aggressions that are in the field. And sometimes for me, the most compassionate thing, and it's very, very difficult at times, is to be like, hey, I'm going to pause, because what you're saying or what you're doing right now is actually causing harm.
mm,
And that can be a way of being compassionate. It's not always about like coming to our place and sitting in our seat and taking it back to the cushion, but this, on the spot activity. And that's, this opening up the throat, I think, oftentimes can be really helpful in how we begin to express compassion for self. And, to say this isn't okay, what's happening in the field, or when we see other things, other injustices happening to somebody else, can we soften, can we open in that throat, can we see with those eyes, and
mm,
can we say no? And so those are some of the things that I relate to. And then this whole idea too of, I might not be in a community suddenly where I can feel that sense of safety, but it's been posited many times that, the earth is our witness, right? Like we still have a witness in the inherent human dignity of who we are. The elements are supporting us. The earth knows who we are. If we can't get to that place in the moment, I have my breath, I have my breathing, I have the earth who notices me and knows the beauty of my heart. And until I can get to, those other beings that, I can feel more comfortable and supported in community with, I flash on those things. It's not always
mm,
easy.
mm. Yeah, thanks for everything that you shared there, and just reflecting through my lenses of interconnected compassion, and just hearing all the elements of that, that you were speaking to tuning and working with self-compassion. You were speaking to the broader way that these actions of sticking up for yourself ripple out and benefit not just you, but others who may suffer from similar pain and harm. And yeah, also setting boundaries, right? Both in the moment. And one thing I can say about this uniquely that we could talk about in the course is, setting proactive boundaries so that we lessen the likelihood of encountering repeated stressors like this in ways. I think that was part of what you're sharing as well. But just the nuance and the complexity of that question and your answer, Carla, highlight, I think, why an interconnected compassion lens equips us with a compass for relating more to the complexity and nuance of what compassion is actually like in the real world when we're dealing with, these compassion blind spots and these other kinds of blind spots like racism and so on. So thank you. Um,
I appreciate the question.
And then we got 2 minutes left, so maybe I will pause on the questions, and we'll move to close. We wanted to invite you all in the chat. I had posed a question, 2 to 3 things you love that aren't people. But Carla invited us to reflect on the benefit of caring for ourselves, rippling out and affecting us and many others, potentially even seeing ourselves in our own bodies, care for that as a way of caring for the earth and all beings. So we wanted to close with a kind of myself and practice here in the chat. So what we'd love to have you type in is, how does caring for yourself or learning to cultivate more self-compassion in this kind of interconnected frame that we're talking about tonight, how does that benefit someone else you care about? And so if you can put in the chat something like myself and my nephew, Or I just I have a new nephew as of 2 days ago. So I'm thinking of my little nephew right now and hoping that my care for myself and my compassion practice over time can benefit my nephew as well. So it can be indirect, this ripple effect of our self-compassion and self-care. So myself and maybe just mention some people. They don't have to be by name, but I'd love to read some of those out. Myself and my friends, myself and my granddaughters, myself and my son, myself and my animals, myself and my mom, myself and the people in my support group, myself and my friends, myself and my future grandchildren. Love that. Myself and my aunt, myself and my patients. Yes. Myself and my community, myself and my sisters, my friends, myself and my adult-ish kids. Yeah. Nice. Becomes more complex, right? Often parenting. Wow, thank you all so much for sharing that in the chat. Myself and my students, right? Very relatable for us as teachers, instructors.
Mm.
Wonderful. Well, we're at time. Thank you all so much for sticking with us, for joining us. If you're watching the recording back, for joining us in that way. Just read one more here. It says myself and the new employee who is learning, right? Someone new to the job. Thank you all so much. And please do reach out to us if you have questions about our upcoming course. We'd love for you to join us. Carla, anything else that you want to say as we move to close?
No, just so happy and delighted to be all with all of you and getting to know you this way. Thank you.
Hmm. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Bye.
Bye.